Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sam Pedram, Chair of the Board of Directors at the Australian Institute of Project Management, AIPM. It is my pleasure to be moderating today's conversation. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we each gather today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us today. At AIPM, we work with leaders operating in complexity, where risk is real, decisions are visible, and delivery matters. Today's discussion focuses on women leading in high-risk and complex environments, which is particularly important as organizations across various industries such as infrastructure, resources, defense and technology, and major transformation programs continue to navigate increasing complexity, risk, and pace of change. This conversation is about how leadership shows up under pressure, how authority is established, how decisions are made with imperfect information, and how cultures are shaped while outcomes are delivered. Today, we are joined by an exceptional panel of senior leaders with deep experience in demanding environments. I'd like to welcome Dr. Nikki Vincent, Victoria's Public Sector Gender Equality Commissioner, Professor Jackie True, Director of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and Dr. Kerry Freeman, Chief Executive Officer of Brisbane City Council. Thank you all for being here and for your willingness to share real practical leadership insights. To set the strategic context for the discussion today, I'd like to start by looking at the external landscapes shaping leadership. So Dr. Vincent, I'll start with you. What do you see as the defining leadership challenges facing organizations delivering high risk, high complexity initiatives over the next decade?
Thank you for having me, and I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri land. I think it's whether we've actually got leaders whose way of making sense of the world is complex enough for the challenges that we're asking them to lead. I think we're seeing generally that the capacity of our leaders isn't up to that complexity of the challenges we're facing for things like climate change, entrenched inequality, and so on. They're not technical problems where we've got a really clear problem definition and a clear rational solution. They're adaptive challenges or wicked challenges that involve multiple tangled complex systems and really strongly held values and beliefs, and solving them requires people to change those values and beliefs and behaviours, which is hugely challenging. And I think those kind of environments need leaders who can hold ambiguity and can integrate multiple perspectives and make values-based decisions under scrutiny. And it requires the capacity to see systems, not just problems. And most organisations just keep reaching for technical fixes. So I think the leadership challenge over the next decade is developing the capacity of leaders to actually sit with uncertainty, challenge the very systems that we're embedded in, and lead from principle rather than from procedure.
Yeah, that's a very great answer. Thank you very much. And I agree with all of the comments you've made. So we'll go over to Dr. Freeman. I'd like to hear your views on this.
Sure. And so nice to meet my other panelists. I'm just sitting here thinking if I could just be a participant and listen to you talk, that would be amazing. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the two of you as well. Look, for me, there's probably three things. And I'd first of all like to acknowledge those of you who are listening today who may have loved ones overseas who are experiencing significant risk and challenge and devastation in various conflict zones. And I think the geopolitical shifts that you see playing out, which in some ways, if you're a historian, you'd look back on post any global pandemics and think this is probably a bit inevitable. And there's a bit of a shifting of the world order. And I think that it's easy, particularly in Australia, tucked away here, to think this isn't really going to impact us. But of course, it's going to fundamentally impact how we operate and what our future looks like. So I think that's one. It's the big geopolitical shift we see playing out right now. And I think for me, the second challenge and opportunity is around tech and AI. And, I often have futurists approach our organisation here at Council to say, can we come and talk to your people about the future? And I say, nobody knows the future right now. And in fact, you'd do better rolling the dice and having a guess. But I think what's going to happen with tech and AI, even in the next 18-month horizon, is going to be like us being transported now into a village in England 200 years ago. And the difference between what we are now to the village, I think we're going to see that difference in the next 5 years. Just as I said, I don't trust futurists. There's my futuristic prediction. But I think the tech and AI landscape is absolutely going to drive organisations and leadership challenge. And for me, the third one being a local government organisation. Brisbane, we serve about 1.3 million residents. I've got about 10,000 staff. That's a lot of people stuff, and people run on trust and on their expectations. So for me, we've got this very clearly shifting geopolitical context, which will shift what happens in Australia. I think we've got this unknown but completely unprecedented shift, completely unprecedented with AI and tech. And then I think the impact on the people stuff, which is trust and expectations. So for me, those are the three really shaping my thinking at the moment as a leader.
Right, and they're all very great and valid points. And again, you touched on the fact that the other matter that Dr. Vincent also mentioned, and I agree with completely, that we are all, like Australia and us, we're all part of the system. So it's a system of systems thinking approach. So one thing happens in one part of the world that impacts on the other part. So and that includes the workforce and everything else, the way of life. And that creates a lot of complexities that we have to manage. Dr. True, over to you. I'd like to hear your views, please.
Well, I can really just echo what Nikki and Kerry have emphasized. I think, that there is significant rupture. I'm not sure that there's more change and challenge than in previous historical periods, but I do think we've lived through a period of stability, and that is changing fast. So I think the leadership challenge is about being future oriented, really thinking ahead. And framing the risks and opportunities of those various changes for your people, because all of these, whether it's talking about the risk and opportunity of artificial intelligence for your workforce, for your industry, or whether it's talking about the global pressures, especially the impact on supply chains, the uncertainty in markets, which will affect your business, these are all going to affect people. And so the leadership challenge is to be able to frame those risks and opportunities and be future oriented, think ahead, and reason back, what's the journey you need to be on. And I think Kerry, you also emphasized, for us in Australia, we can sometimes be living in a vacuum. We have first world problems. We are really connected, but we don't always make the connections. And I think that needs to happen because we are going to need to have much better leadership strategy for the future for our people.
Great, thank you very much. That sets a very strong strategic frame. I'd like to build on that and move from external pressures to internal leadership capability. So that brings us to the next question, which is in environments where credibility isn't automatically granted, what do senior leaders often misunderstand about how authority is actually established? So, Dr. True, well, we read you. I'll probably throw it to yourself to answer that question, and then we'll go around the panel.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Sam. I think it is, many of us would think that that positional influence of leaders is the primary type of power, and that credibility flows from that position. But I think that is absolutely not the case, and it doesn't matter whether you're the Prime Minister or the CEO, or even in my case, just a director of a research centre. So I think, credibility is established not by what you say, but what you do, and how you role model your expectations for your organization, yourself. And I just give a brief example of, maybe this also touches on the dimension of sort of change and challenge that we just discussed. I mean, I look to some examples of people who have role modeled, and leaders who have done that in a way that's yeah, really, really swift. So I think of, something like, how do you establish credibility if you are a leader in a crisis, for example? And we're getting used to this, but I think about, for example, something like a terror attack, and we've had one of these recently in Australia with the Bondi attacks. And I think about, a leader I admire, Jacinda Ardern, and what she did after the Christchurch terror attack, which killed 51 people. So, she didn't waste any time there. She actually immediately put a hijab on and got on a plane to that city to meet the people, the families of the victims that were most affected. So I think credibility there in that kind of national leadership role was quickly established by what she did. Not what she said, because she didn't actually say much, but what she did. So I would really highlight the importance of acting and being seen to act. And, people will follow suit.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a good, you mentioned some good examples there. Would any of the other panelists like to add anything else to this question or response? Okay. All right. So staying with the theme of credibility, we haven't done with that yet. I'd like to move on into those first sort of defining leadership moments when authority is being actively tested. So Dr. Freeman, when you are leading in an environment when your authority is being tested, explicitly or subtly, what matters most in those first critical decisions?
Yeah, well, I guess my question is, what is authority? And to pick up on what Jackie said, I think the idea that your authority is referential or positional it's not a reality in many circumstances. In some areas it is. In my world, that's not really a reality. Your reality is that your authority is actually about your social license to act, both with communities, in my case, and with staff. And so if you're getting a lot of pushback around some of the decisions or changes or vision or any of those things that you do, particularly in my role as a chief executive, it means that I haven't earned the social license for that change. And that is usually done by having a genuine intent to want to support others to succeed.
Yes.
And if you have kind of an internal focus on, as a leader, what do you need to do to succeed, it's going to be very difficult to easily gain that social license you need to make change happen. And so I think for me, it is, if I'm feeling that kind of pushback and the vibe that I haven't got it quite right, I will always examine what have I done to gain the social license to lead through this for people and for the organisation. I've said sorry lots of times too, and that I've got it wrong. And I've gone back to staff and said I've got it wrong, explained specifically what I'm apologising for, and specifically where I've recognised it went wrong, and also what I'm going to do to make amends. Because any good apology, as you all know, has to be very specific. You have to explain why you're not going to do it again, and you have to pay the price for that mistake. And I think there's something about being a human being around that, which then also creates the opportunity for you to have people come with you on this journey. You can't lead without followers. That's the thing, especially me. It's one of me, and we've got nearly 10,000 staff. I actually can't pull any of those people along with me. I have to have that social license to move us forward together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, again, people and followers and members, employees will see through what the leader is genuinely about. So that human element that leaders, some leaders bring, and great leaders bring, that's for sure, into the workplace and the environment. Although we don't treat it as a visible element of leadership, but people can certainly sense it and see that. So for a leader to own up to their mistakes, and mistakes and errors can happen for different reasons in different environments. Again, complexity is a topic of today's discussion. And in those complex environments, there's a good chance that leaders will be met with challenges and errors. And then just owning up to that and trying to make amends genuinely, I think, is a great trait of leadership. That naturally brings us to decision making under uncertainty, something all senior leaders must navigate, as I just mentioned. So, Dr. Vincent, how do you make high consequence decisions when the information will never be complete? And how do you maintain momentum without creating avoidable risks?
Yeah, good question. In practice, I work with kind of three disciplines. First, I distinguish what I know and what I can find out in reasonable time and what is genuinely unknowable at this time. I don't treat all uncertainty the same way. I think secondly, making your decision-making framework transparent. So not just the decision, but the logic and values underneath it. And, transparency is a really important value of mine. It's what I require of duty holders under the legislation that I implement, but it's also something that I feel very strongly about in my own organisation as well, and collaborative decision making. So you don't make good decisions in complex environments on your own, doing that with other people. So, but talking about the framework you're using and being non-defensive about, inviting people to critique and changing your decision. And I think that builds trust when outcomes are uncertain. And then thirdly, I would say, staying close to the evidence as it emerges, as you roll out whatever it is that you're doing, and new evidence comes in, be genuinely willing to revise along the way, like that non-defensiveness, not taking things personally, not being wedded to being right, I think is really, really important. That's not a weakness. If you change your mind or you revise things, that's actually intellectual integrity. And I think the risk that leaders create is often less about acting on incomplete information and more about pretending that certainty they don't have, or from paralysis that is dressed up as diligence. So not being able to move or do anything and saying, well, that's because I don't have all the information. So I think those are kind of the factors to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to add one more thing, and it's kind of like a small follow-up question. How do we then deal with situations when there is a strong disagreement? How do we bring others in and basically create that buy-in?
Well, I think you always bring people in. One of the ways I operate as a leader is with an amazing team of experts around me. And, I ask to be argued with. I ask to have robust conversations because I never think that I am the expert. Other people have expertise, and we know from experience when people have spoken up and said, I think you could have thought about this, or you've missed that the decision becomes better. But ultimately, if you cannot get a resolution or agreement. If you are the leader, you are still the leader, and you have to take the risk of making that decision on the best evidence that you have at the time, non-defensively changing your position as you go along, and if you need to, if more information comes in. And as I think Jackie has said, previously, I think it was Jackie, it might not have been, being prepared to apologise, say you're wrong, own it, is very important.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. I'll invite other panelists if you'd like to add any other insights to this.
Look, I might just say one thing. Prior to working in council, I worked for many years in health and was chief executive in health, and health is a complex environment. I like the Cynefin model. You got simple, complicated, complex, and kind of chaos. And you've got to understand what frame you're making a decision in, because if you're in true complexity, which health is, it's heuristics and intuition backed up with the evidence and data you've got at the time. Whereas if you're in complicated or simple environments, it's about the facts and the figures and the data and the process. So I think you've also got to understand in what frame are you making this decision, because the tools are different and the way you make decisions. And I think, as Nikki said, your decision-making framework is different. But one thing I learned after many years in health, where you are literally making life and death decisions, and it's probably one of the most complex environments you can work in. One thing I learned to work with teams on is sometimes you have to be okay with choosing the least worst option. And sometimes people go in thinking you're going to have the right answer, the best answer, the answer we can all go home and feel relaxed about. In complex environments, you sometimes have to take the least worst option in short time periods and high risk environments. And you have to create a culture where that's actually okay. And if it fails, it's okay. And I always say to my teams, it's not what happens that matters. Things are going to happen. We're running big businesses, complex businesses. It's not what happens that matters. It's how you deal with it and what you learn from it that counts. And in that learning culture, no blame culture, people can relax their frontal lobe. They can think creatively. And they can feel comfortable that at the end of the day, with everything we know, we need to make a decision. It's not the best option, because there is no best option. It's the least worst option, but we can all live with it. And there's a huge cultural element to that decision making in really complex environments.
That's a perfect segue into the next point and the next question, because we know even the strongest decisions don't always deliver the expected outcomes. So let's talk about recovery and trust. So when a major decision doesn't deliver the intended outcomes, what distinguishes leaders who recover trust quickly from those who don't? I'll ask Dr. True first, and then we'll go around and ask the other panelists to please add your views.
Thanks. I think Kerry actually gave a really good answer to this question before. And my simple answer is when a decision doesn't deliver the intended outcome, you can recover trust very quickly by communicating. Communicate. And I think Kerry said, say sorry, take responsibility. How you will learn from the mistake, how you will go forward and provide a plan. So I think we see this so often. We see so many times when things go wrong, and many people are impacted, not only in the organization but across Australia. And probably what we've all noticed is that the degree of communication and how rapid it is, and whether people take responsibility. And often they don't, and it actually just gets worse, and then that leader needs to go. So I was really impressed with Kerry's answer and what you had to say there about, really talking about how you're going to make amends and really, fronting up. That's the role of the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. The 24/7 sort of social media cycle, it is rapidly, by the time you think of a response, things have already shifted and moved on. So that makes it a lot more challenging these days to respond and to respond appropriately. So Dr. Vincent, I appreciate your views on the matter.
Yeah, look, I think I would just wholeheartedly agree with Jackie and Kerry. Acknowledging the issue clearly and early and focusing on what the failure revealed rather than why it wasn't your fault, and then moving quickly to what changes as a result. So we forgive decisions that don't work, but we don't forgive leaders whose identity is fused with being right and who prioritise self-protection over accountability. So yeah, I think that just basically sums up everything that Kerry and Jackie said.
Yeah, no, I agree in terms of what actions leaders can take, options they do have. Sometimes they don't have a lot of options, but what can you do with minimal resources in a very quick time frame? That's what distinguishes, I guess, good leaders from just the leaders that are carrying a title. So thank you very much for your responses. Shifting from decision making to leadership presence, I'd like to explore how leaders show up in high-stake environments. Dr. Freeman, at senior levels, how do you balance authenticity with the expectations of the environment you're leading in?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that also the closer you are to politics, that you have to consider these balances, and it's kind of it's a daily thing when you work very close to politics when you're running an organisation. But I'd tell a story from when I was a chief executive in health when COVID hit, and obviously that was a significant challenge for everybody across the world as well as health services. But it was at the time when our chief health officer had said that people could not go and visit their family members in the ICU. You know, you couldn't move around; everyone was in lockdown, and we had a man in our ICU who was very unwell. The staff thought he was going to die from COVID. He was ventilated. And he had a wife and two young children who would come and sit out in the car park, basically live out in the car park, begging to be able to say goodbye to their father and to her husband. And my team asked them to come together and to give me the advice. And on balance, my executive team said it was not going to be possible to have them come and visit this gentleman. And they'd weighed it all up and they'd done a risk assessment. And I remember going home that night and sitting on the stairs in my house and crying for about 45 minutes because I just thought, this man is going to die and his children are not going to see him. And my team have just given me absolutely sound advice. But I rang them up and I said to them, if this was your father or your son, what would you do? Find a way. Find a way.
Yep.
Now, in that circumstance, I could have absolutely, legitimately, hand on heart, Royal Commission style, justified my decision. But I'm a human being. And sometimes, if you want to be authentic in these complex situations, trust your human self. You like, not your title, not your work self, trust your human self. And my incredible team found a way to make that happen for that family. And there's something there about when everything looks logical and it ticks the boxes, but your gut feeling tells you this is wrong. You know, I would say find a way. And to me, that's something we're called on to do as leaders. And that to me is your real authentic leadership.
Yeah, no, great story there. I'm glad that your leadership led to a better outcome for all involved. Because again, it's a very things like that I do remember stories coming out of the media at the time when COVID hit, and people could not get in touch. And just, it was very hard to imagine putting yourself in their shoes. And I was also feeling for all the leaders that had to make those decisions. Because you look at both sides of the decision making and the people that are being impacted by those decisions. So that was a very touching story. Thanks for sharing that. leadership at this level often requires deliberate trade-offs, as you have alluded to somehow. So let's make those a bit more explicit. So Dr. Vincent, what leadership trade-offs have you consciously made to succeed at senior levels, and which would you make again without hesitation?
Yeah, I don't think I've made trade-offs to succeed in the way that you might be thinking about in asking the question, but I've consistently traded comfort and institutional approval for credibility with the people whose interests I serve. So, taking a clear public position on, whatever issue, gender equality, my role at the moment means I defend the evidence, I name the structural barriers, I push back on backlash, and sometimes I create real friction with powerful institution, and I would make that trade every time. I've made it every time, and I'd make it again. So, but I don't think that's I haven't thought about whether that's succeeding at senior levels. It's about succeeding in what my mission is, to drive change on gender equality.
Yeah, absolutely. And this leads to a broader question about influence, not just operating within the systems, but shaping them. Dr. True, at senior levels again, because we've got senior leaders here, so it's got a senior leadership lens on everything we're discussing today. How much of your leadership is about changing the system rather than succeeding within the system that actually exists right now?
Thanks, Sam. This is a great question, because I think we can be very successful within the system, right? And since it's sort of we're considering International Women's Day, I mean, I think women can be very good men. And we've seen amazing displays of leadership where, you can see women have the capabilities and the skills that men do. But to sort of achieve or to sort of address some of those challenges that we started this webinar with, the kind of global pressures and uncertainty, the technological ruptures, to be able to address those challenges, you actually have to be able to change the system and not simply thrive and achieve within it. So I absolutely think, every leader needs to consider what their part and role is in changing the system so we can address those systematic challenges that are affecting everyone. And they're certainly affecting our ability to, continue prospering, continue giving everyone a job, and helping everyone to achieve their potential. So I like case studies, and I think we can learn so much from role models in the past and currently. And I think really in terms of changing the system, it is that human element that both Kerry and Nikki have been emphasizing. And I think, I've been interviewing some pro-democracy women leaders around the world. And I think, those are people who have to change the system because they're coming from situations, of authoritarian dictatorship. Really, there's a complete break on people's potential. And I think what's really interesting there is that they're emphasizing the need for leaders to be much bolder. And that means basically, really taking responsibility for others and their sacrifices, and really, really focusing on really being motivated to what you can do every way, to take that responsibility, but also to kind of, as you go, even if you have a vision of changing the system, and that I'm talking about people here who want to change the system to be a democratic one where more people have voice, that along the way you also have to provide concrete support to people as you're changing the system, because it's a transition, right? It's often a bumpy road before you get to that transformation. So, but yeah, I think I think leaders, their role is to change the system. We can't address the challenges we confront without a change in the system.
Yeah, great insights there. And I'd like to add a project profession lens on what you just mentioned, Jackie, in terms of the change cannot happen without proper support. So that's a big part of what project managers know as and practice as change management. So if you're changing a system, it could be a political system or anything else in a complex environment, then you may need to make sure that the right support is there and it continues until the transition happens. So that's a great point. Dr. Freeman, I'd like to basically ask your views if you'd like to add anything else to what Jackie just said.
Yeah, sure, Sam. So I think the system changes anyway, whether you do anything or not. The only question is, are you going to shape some of that or not? And I think if you're going to shape some of that change, it's going to change anyway. The system's always changing. The world's always, nothing stays as it is. That's, the absolute fact. So I think if you want to have a role in shaping that change, I think the thing to do is to work out what exactly is your role in it. Because where I've often seen people have great ambition for change, but then are ultimately disappointed and dispirited, is where they're not being very clear about the problem they're trying to solve. And is that within their bailiwick? Now, I'm not saying that you can't ever reach out and seek to influence, but actually you have to work out what is the bit of change you want to shape and is actually your job to shape. And so for me, that's where you get the most traction. At the moment, we've got an issue like many cities have in Brisbane with rough sleepers or people who are homeless. And if you Google Brisbane City Council, you'll see that there's been a lot of media about our role in the interagency approach. Our role is to enact our local law, which is to keep our parks clean. We work with housing, whose job it is to find housing, with health, whose job it is to assist with drug and alcohol and mental health issues, with immigration, who's assist. And we work with this big interagency team, which is the system, to change the system, but within that to do our job. And when one part of the system isn't doing their job, you can never change the system. So I think the thing is to be part of shaping the change, which is inevitable, but to work out what's your job in it and actually do your job as part of that system. And that's where I've seen sustainable change happen, certainly in my career.
Yeah, great points there. Building on system level leadership, I'd like to turn to structural change and future leadership pathways. And I'm looking at you, Dr. Vincent. If we want to see more women leading in high-risk, complex environments, what needs to change first? Systems, sponsorship, leadership models, or how we define readiness?
Hard to pick one of those, but how we define readiness, because I think that's where the other three are stuck. So how we define readiness is so often about conventional, typical male career progression. It assumes continuous employment, linear career paths, institutional sponsorship networks, and, often a particular presentation of confidence. We systematically discount the complexity and the adaptive experience and the relational intelligence that women, particularly women who've navigated structural disadvantage, actually bring. And I'm a useful example. I was kicked out of home when I was 15. I had 4 kids by the time I was 25. I was a single parent by 32. And then I went to university alongside paid work and caregiving. And none of that shows up as readiness in conventional frameworks, but the adaptive capacity it built in me, the ability to work with uncertainty, to hold multiple competing priorities, there were lots, to lead under pressure with limited resources, is precisely what high complexity environments need. So yes, we need sponsorship and we need systems change, but sponsorship into systems that are broken for many women just reproduces the problem at a slightly more diverse table. So we need to change what we're looking for and why, and that requires leadership leaders with the consciousness to see the lens that they're looking through and to challenge it.
Absolutely. Great points. Dr. True, your views, please.
Well, I think that was fantastic points that you made there, Nikki. What an incredible experience you've had. I'm really awed by, those that adaptability that you've shown in your career and life. Wow. I think a big thing is about changing mindsets. And I think that really relates to what Nikki's talking about anyway, just the pervasive stereotypes we have of people, and particularly of women, right? That women can't lead, that if they have children, they can't juggle other things, that they'll always put them first, that they don't have the strength or the expertise. This is common. Who hasn't heard that throughout their life? Oh, they're just too weak to be able to take that on. I just recall I have a sibling who's an incredibly strong woman and professional, and spent most of her life being told by family members that she was too weak to be a medical doctor, which was insane. But imagine the compounder, like how many times society, our own families and friends could send messages that. So the mindsets are really important. And I think what can change mindsets is the visible role models, which we've just, Nikki has just given her own personal example there, and the demonstration effects of that, right? I think that's so impressive, and that's why it's so important, International Women's Day, that we recognize the visible role models we have in our community, in our organizations, who have overcome tremendous disadvantage and hurdles, and yet have thrived and really are positive examples of leadership in our community. So that for me undergirds absolutely everything. It's about changing our mindsets.
Absolutely, and I admire Dr. Vincent's story and the background, where you started and where you are now, as a very great role model for all of us. So I really appreciate that story and you sharing that. Alongside system and the structures, the role of active allyship is critical. I think we all agree on that in terms of sustaining change. Again, goes back to the mindset and goes back to the support that is needed for the change. Jackie, maybe we will continue with you and then go to the other panelists in terms of the next question, which is very relevant to the points you just made. In high risk or traditionally male-dominated environments, what does allyship look like when it actually changes outcomes, not just culture?
So because I'm a scholar and I do research, and I'm not just going to talk about my personal experience, what I've also learned from others, I think a really great practice, an example of allyship that works and that especially works for women is this notion of the amplify principle. I guess we all naturally can do this, but some need to learn it. And this was developed under the US Obama administration when there weren't as many women in the executive cabinet. And a lot of women were the assistant kind of ministerial equivalents. They were sitting in the second row. And what they learned is basically whenever a woman spoke or had an idea, is to immediately amplify that and connect it with that woman so that no man in the room could then take that idea and present it as his own. So it's about amplifying, it could be women, it could be other marginalized perspectives. And the outcome in that example, which has been written up as a case, is, in the second Obama administration, he actually promoted a lot of those women, and it was a gender parity in that cabinet. And so that actually women have a lot of collective power. And, whilst there's also, competition and other dynamics that affect us as well, I think, allyship it is about amplifying other women and acknowledging and, recognizing their contributions.
Yes, absolutely. And Dr. Freeman, I'd welcome your views on this.
Well, I'm sort of just mesmerized by the last two lots of answers, because I think that really does cover it. I think the only small thing I'd add is, when I look back through my career, I had so many women that lifted me up. Like so many women that lifted me up. I can even name them. So I think then what you do is you lift others up. And there's something in that that is so powerful. Without the sponsorship, support, guidance, mentorship of women in my life over my career, I never would have got access to the type of roles that I then ended up securing and building a career on. So now I do that. I purposely seek out women and respond to women who seek me out, and I help them in really practical ways. And don't ever think that doing that for a handful of people is like a drop in the ocean. It's not. It creates a ripple that makes a huge difference. So I would say if there are women on today and men on today, but particularly women, where you've been lifted up, you just lift others up, and it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And Dr. Vincent, absolutely. I was going to go to you, please.
Great. Yeah, I want to talk specifically about male allyship because I'm hoping that there are some men. We can't see the audience, but I'm hoping there are some men. But if not, the women in the room can talk to them about this, because I think, allyship that changes systems, allyship that just changes culture but not actual outcomes or systems is performative. So, allyship that just makes public statements and comes to events and agrees in principle, all of that's great, but it doesn't cost you anything, and it still leaves women holding the cost of, speaking up, the risk of speaking up, and getting spoken over. And so allyship that really changes outcomes requires allies to actually do something, like do something about gender pay gaps, do something about sexual harassment in their workplace, change who gets access to high profile opportunities, who gets protected when they challenge things, who gets credit for ideas, as Jackie and Kerry have said, and who carries the invisible labour, right, in organisations, and the labour of institutional reform, because mostly right now that's women. And so concretely, I think that does mean actively sponsoring women, taking risk and being visible, intervening in real time when women are interrupted, dismissed or undermined, declining to participate in panels and events that exclude women, and there's still a lot of them, and pushing back on promotional decisions that apply gendered standards of readiness, as we were just talking about previously. So we really need allies to be willing to take some of the heat that comes with challenging an entrenched system, rather than leaving that entirely to the people who are most harmed by it. And I think that's the difference between support and solidarity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the difference between performative support and actual genuine support, I think, becomes a bit more visible during this period when we are celebrating the International Women's Weekend a month and all of that. But it's there every day, really. So we need to actively look into how we can structurally change. And I absolutely agree with everything the three of you just said. Very great points. To close this segment, I'd like to ask each of you to please share one defining leadership insight. In one sentence, please, what is the single most important leadership capability for succeeding in high risk, high visibility environments? Dr. Vincent, we'll stay with you and then go around.
Okay, I've kind of already said this. I think it's just knowing that you cannot and should not do it alone. Building the relationships, the coalition, and the shared ownership that means that better decisions are made and the work survives beyond you.
Absolutely fantastic. Dr. Freeman.
Oh, the single thing for me is have an absolute relentless mindset on how can I support others to succeed? How can I support others to succeed? How can I help? If that is your mindset, you will be surrounded by success and you will lift everybody around you up, and you will also lift. Rising tide lifts all boats. And you've got to think it, you've got to mean it, not pretend it, not be, as I think Nikki said, performative in these things. You've got to mean it. What can I do to help others succeed? I came into that mindset today with the panel. And that, to me, if you can take one thing away and put that in place in your life, you're going to see your leadership and your life transform.
Great. And Dr. True?
I would emphasize the leadership capability is empowerment of others. Really empower others, believe in others. People can usually achieve even more if you enable them, and they can achieve the goals of your organization. So back that empowerment up with practical support and, take responsibility for, and I guess this is just to really echo all of our views.
Fantastic. Thank you for those thought-provoking insights, all of you panelists. We will now move on to audience questions. Just checking the time. We've got a little bit of time left to take some questions. I'd like the audience to please submit your questions via the chat box, keeping them concise and directed to the panel. And we'll take as many as possible within the time left, because my aim is to close at 1, because our panelists have got other engagements and they've been very generous with their time today. So we'll have a look at the chat box and see if I can see anything come through. I can see some comments. Leadership and I will. What happens when you have intersecting disadvantages? This only compounds the effect of discrimination. Dr. Vincent.
Yeah. It absolutely can. Under the Gender Equality Act, which I implement in Victoria, we bring the legislation specifically talks about compounding disadvantage and discrimination. So things like, firstly, being a woman, but then also being a woman from a culturally and racially marginalised background, a First Nations woman, a woman with disability, all of those intersecting forms of discrimination and disadvantage. So that's a really important lens to bring to this, because we can't just design gender equality for white, straight, able-bodied women. Otherwise, we're just actually not solving the problem. So we did an analysis actually in 2023, and you can find it on our website, called Intersectionality at Work. And it we did lots of qualitative research by researchers with lived experience, but also looked at some quantitative data on pay gaps and leadership representation. And we found that what supported all of the qualitative research that was done, we found absolutely strong evidence of pay gaps, the largest being for First Nations women, then women with disability and culturally and racially marginalised women, LGBTIQA plus people, and so forth. Much bigger pay gaps for women with compounded discrimination and disadvantage, intersectional disadvantage. And on top of that, they were less represented in leadership roles and more likely to experience things like sexual harassment. So it's something that my team and I are very conscious of, and something we talk about every day, and something that thankfully for the first time is enshrined in legislation in Victoria as a consideration.
Yes, and Dr. True, I believe you have also conducted a lot of research in this area, so I'd welcome your insights as well.
Well, I think there's often a misnomer that, treating people equally is treating them the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just emphasize that, that people come with different backgrounds, different experiences of inequality, discrimination, and disadvantage, but also different, lived experiences and different capabilities and skills because of those intersectional backgrounds. And so that, I think we need to kind of recognize those positively, like what those individuals really bring to the organization, and not use the rules and norms that may have maybe the dominant ones that have worked well for those, who don't come from intersectional groups. I think again we need to not just have a nuanced approach to every individual, but we need to question the norms and the rules that we have in our organizations and how they benefit some over others, and really recognize the unique talents and abilities of those from intersectional backgrounds, so we can learn so much from them. And that our expectations should be, really open to the talents that they bring.
Absolutely. We have time for one more question, and for that one, I'll go to Dr. Freeman. Do you reckon AI would be able to assist in combating these challenges?
Wow, the big question, isn't it? Is it going to entrench some of these things into the algorithm, or is it going to reveal new opportunities? And I guess that's up to us. It's up to the people. And, we're investing in AI and technology like many people are, and many organizations are. But it's all about the more people and more tech, but better tech, better AI. And that's the thing. AI can very easily entrench all of the issues that we're currently facing now and double down on it. And to avoid that, we have to absolutely be mindful that this is a tool. This is a tool that reflects the strategies, the culture, and the leadership that we need to deliver on our strategies. So I'm just hedging my bets there, because if you don't take some control on it, it will control you. And it's like any system and any tool that you rely on, it has to reflect your inherent direction, your inherent values.
Yes, that's a great point. And we all know AI is being trained by humans. So as humans, we have responsibility. Responsible use of AI comes into play, the governance of it, in terms of how it can actually help us with these challenges. We don't have time for any more questions. Thank you for those who've been submitting more questions. And please feel free to, outside of this session, view the video when it goes up on the YouTube channel. And also, I'm sure you can reach out to panelists afterwards, and through their organizations, and they'll be more than willing to share their insights and knowledge, again with great generosity. As we've heard today, leadership in high-risk and complex environment isn't about fitting a mold. It is about judgment, courage, and delivery when it matters most. On behalf of the board and the AIPM, I'd like to sincerely thank the panelists for your candor, generosity, and leadership. And thank you all to our audience for engaging in this important conversation. And finally, as we approach the International Women's Day, I want to acknowledge the women across our profession who lead in complexity every day, often without visibility, often under pressure, and always with impact. Thank you, and I wish you all a very happy International Women's Day. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Dreams held back, a future blurred, but tonight we rise. We won't be bound. With every step, we'll stand our ground. Breaking barriers, we're breaking free. Breaking barriers for you and me. We'll change the world, make a way. Breaking barriers starting today. must come, we all belong. For every daughter, every son, a bright